Welcome to the Arate Podcast, the podcast created to help senior executives and the organisations they lead live up to their full potential. Join us for cutting-edge interviews with leading senior executive and board members across all industry sectors, and for practical tips to accelerate your executive career. And now, here's your host, Richard Triggs.
It is great to see you again, although people listening to this audio podcast won't be seeing you. And as I said to you just before we started, the last time we spoke on the podcast was back in August 2021. You're still very much dealing with a COVID world. And now we're in this sort of post-COVID situation. But it's exciting to have you back on to talk about your new book, Presilience: How to Navigate Risk, Embrace Opportunity and Build Resilience, which I think was released literally last month.
Exactly right, Richard, and thank you for having me back. Thank you to your listeners again, and very excited to talk about the book, its evolution, the concept, and its approach.
Right. Well, look, I suppose for people who want to hear Gav's backstory, I'd suggest going back and listening to that episode, which is episode 174. But perhaps just to sort of start off the conversation, without going into as much detail as we did previously, just give us sort of the abridged version of your background up until now.
Sure. So realistically, I'm a multifaceted high achiever. I achieve in 4 key domain areas, which are of interest to me. The first being business. I've been a CEO for nearly 25 years, bought and sold a few businesses, scaled and built my latest one, which is turning over about $45 million now and doing pretty well. My other interests are my specialities, being risk management and security. In both of those, I've won multiple awards. I was the Australasian Risk Leader of the Year in 2022-2023, was the runner-up Executive of the Year in the CEO Awards last year. And on the security side, I'm the only Australian to have made it onto the IFSEC Global Thought Leaders list 4 years in a row. And then probably the last part of interest for most people is I'm a lifelong martial artist and I've been training since I was 5. Hold an 8th degree black belt, and I know you and I have got lots in common when it comes to that sort of thing.
Unfortunately, as a 57-year-old now, I've suffered quite a few injuries, and so I'm more a spectator than a participant now. But I'm on my way to getting back into it, as you and I have discussed offline, which I'm looking forward to. Bit of work to do, I think, first before we get up to full steam ahead. Okay, so look, tell us a little bit specifically about your business as a precursor to then getting into talking about the book.
Sure. So our business is the Risk to Solution Group. We are Australia's leading integrated risk management business, where we play across security, safety, medical, health, risk, and cyber, and look at ways we can save money, add value, and minimize risk for our clients. We do that through 3 primary service lines: training, consulting, and manpower. We're an RTO as well and have built a graduate certificate in organizational resilience, risk, and high reliability, and a postgraduate diploma in Presilience, leadership, and high performance. We have a broad range of clientele, ranging from BHP Billiton, Anglo American on the manpower side, to federal and state government clients on the training side. We also do all the flight crew and cabin crew safety and security awareness training for Virgin Australia, V-Line in Victoria, and many others. So we are quite unique in that one of the things I think is really important in the complex and difficult operating environment that we're all working in now is the ability to make great decisions and leverage technology and what's happening around us for good outcomes, which I actually think that is the field of risk management in a summary version. But practically what we want to do for our clients is enable them to have sustainable high performance during business as usual and thrive through disruption, not just survive, which is the nature of the Presilience work we've been doing. The Presilience stuff really evolved out of almost a 10-year relationship we had with a university where we taught a postgraduate program in the psychology of risk, which enabled us to really dig into the mindset of some of Australia's risk leaders and identify opportunities to help them do their jobs better. That then evolved into consulting with CEOs and boards and taking this methodology we've built and using it to create opportunity-centric, risk-based, sustainable and high-performance outcomes.
And so Presilience, I'm presuming, is a term that you've coined yourself.
Correct. A bit of background on that.
Sure.
As we started running through the psychology of risk and trying to get people to understand what that means, we needed to come up with a definition as a starting point for the idea we refer to as risk intelligence.
Mm-hmm.
So if you're an employer, you want to hire people who are incredibly smart, so they have a great IQ, and you want them to have great EQ, emotional quotient or emotional intelligence. So you want them to be super clever and get along well with others. The challenge is, even if you find those unicorns, which I know it's a specialist piece of your business to find those unique people, the challenge we often have is if they aren't trained in risk-based decision making, they can often make terrible decisions, even though they are very smart and get along well with people. So that's where the idea of risk intelligence came into play. We define it as a living skill, applied attribute that should be designed to enable you to seize upside opportunity while you manage downside outcomes. But the challenge with risk intelligence is that's the skill, right? That's the attitude, that's the approach. What do we do to actually make it happen, to capitalize on it? So along the way, we found a few problems. So if you look at the world of risks haven't happened yet, right? It's not a risk if it's happened. So often people mix up the intersection of risk and resilience. Like, we need resilience when risks get realized. And that's both ways. You might win a huge contract that requires a huge amount of work. Your people need to be resilient and tough enough, and you need to have enough cash flow, etc., to be able to deliver on it. So resilience isn't just a downside thing, it's a growth management thing too. And we found that wasn't well communicated in almost any literature. And particularly the way Australia has evolved, we're quite a risk-averse nation when it comes to decision-making in business. And the challenge being risk-averse is, in some ways it can protect us, but in other ways we miss significant opportunities. We don't adapt and we don't innovate as quickly as our international counterparts.
Yeah, it's very interesting the way that you've sort of presented that then. And certainly, most people, including myself, would have almost a view of risk management as seeing it from a negative context. But your book is, and the whole concept of Presilience, is having that resilience, but also being present and available to take advantage of opportunity as it presents itself. So it's very much a different, from my reading of the book, a different perspective. And I know from my own experience, for example, a couple of years ago, I went and did the AICD Company Directors course. And I started that course, 5-day residential course, thinking, I'd quite like to do some company director work. I think that would be, a nice added string to my bow and interesting and an opportunity to give back. But when they talked about, the risks of being a director and personal risk and risk matrices and risk plans and personal liabilities and so on, so by the end of 5 days, it's like, holy hell, there's no way I want to be a director because it's just too risky, right? Because the whole emphasis was on the negative side of it rather than also incorporating the positive, which is what I think you've done so well in your book.
Thanks, Richard. And your anecdote rings true in so many different ways. I guess if the tone is set from the top and we've got incredibly risk-averse board directors, it's going to be incredibly difficult for the executive team to actually be innovative, be adaptive, and find opportunities in a complex and difficult market. So to your point, one of the things that drove us to keep researching this idea of how do we actually link leadership, high performance, risk and outcomes into a package that works today. is really important, because historically, risk aversion had worked quite well in eras where we have two things going for us: a high degree of control and a high degree of certainty. If you look at your business world right now, we very rarely are in positions of high degrees of control and high degrees of certainty. The challenge is the skill sets we need to function and thrive in a domain where we have limited control and very limited certainty are significantly different to the skill sets we need when we do have control and certainty. So as a result of that, we had to evolve a different way of working. So if you think about the world we're in now, it's volatile, uncertain, complex, ambiguous, and digitized. And those variables continuously interplay and create challenges for every worker. The challenge we've got at the moment, as I'm sure most employers will feel, is we've got a significant productivity slowdown in Australia. And we're dealing with lots of demotivated people who don't want to come into the office and frankly, don't necessarily want to work and thrive. But it's the job of the employer to figure out, how do we connect? How do we re-engage with them? How do we get them to want to produce good outcomes? And that involves a mental shift. If your mindset around risk, decision-making, and leadership fall into what we refer to as CYA, which stands for cover your ass, it's going to be incredibly difficult to get people that want to follow you, are enthused, want to innovate, and want to adapt. So it's not just an intrinsic thing about how you make better decisions to improve your career. That is part of it. But equally, we want to scale that to, what do I do for me? What do I do for you? What do I do for us? And what do we do for the greater good? And if we can't start thinking in these multi-dimensional, multi-domains, we're constantly reacting instead of proacting, which means you're at absolute control of whatever the market or any other external trends are. And it's incredibly difficult to thrive in those domains. So I think part of the opportunity piece is we need to re-look at the way we look at risk and resilience and look at them as strategic enablers, not necessarily compliance ticks or frustration pieces that we have to manage when things go wrong.
Right. Okay. So let's drill down on that a little bit. So you're saying Australia is having a real challenge from a productivity point of view, and obviously tying that to employees' levels of motivation and I suppose positivity towards the work they're doing, and then tying that then to risk and resilience. So just kind of expand on that some more, because I run breakfast groups with CEOs and business owners who are regularly talking about the challenges of not only productivity but also retention, and so let's unpack that a bit more.
Right. So if we look at the way humans are motivated, and as you would have seen in the book, I spent quite a bit of time looking at what I refer to as the basics or fundamentals, which include understanding things like motivation and what motivates you, what motivates others, and how do we actually get goals that are set in a way that they're achievable, as opposed to the way most organizations set their corporate strategies, which is something stuck at the top of the organization that doesn't often translate to the middle and lower levels of the organization, which is why we don't necessarily see such great corporate team-based buy-in to strategy, which is quite sad, actually, because practically, our frontline workers are generally the ones who figure out the best ways to innovate, and they're generally also the lifeblood of our businesses. So if we separate strategy from application, what we tend to get is people who don't understand why they do things. They understand that they have to do them, otherwise there's some consequence. But if you look at Australia's very labor-friendly operating environment, there is a very limited way we can leverage employees. And when I say leverage, that's how do we get the best out of them? And if we can think bigger, it's not just the best out of them for the business, it's the best out of them for themselves, for their families, for their co-workers, for the clients. And ultimately, we need to be thinking about this win-win-win-win-win, not just, I pay you money to come to work to do a job. The fundamental difference, I think, post-COVID, that's changed. And I think Australia and many other countries are still grappling with this, is that we had a huge degradation of people's social skills and coping capabilities. And, it's interesting. Those of you who are listening to this who work out would have no doubt had the experience of you get into great shape and it takes you months, if not years, to get into great shape. And then you stop training for a month or two, and all your hard work over those months or years evaporates in weeks. It's often the same with what I like to refer to as leadership capital. You have to lead continuously, and we have to lead in an authentic, meaningful way, which is incredibly difficult in this current operating context. Not only are we fraught with geopolitical challenges, but equally, as I understand, this is one of the first times in human history we've actually had 5 generations in the workforce at the same time.
Right.
So you've got people who think differently, make decisions differently, are driven by different motivators, and we all get frustrated when they don't get along or don't connect. But that's the job of the manager, the leader, and the supervisor, to try and glue their people together in a way that's good for them, good for the business, and good for the clients. And to directly answer your earlier point, that's where Presilience comes into play. And what we've basically done is build a playbook or a set of methodological tools. And it is a toolbox. It's not a one-step approach. It's a mindset, a toolbox, and a framework that leads to cultural high performance. But practically, what we have found, and I've done this in my own business, is that when we assume people arrive with these skills in place, generally we're disappointed, because very few people are taught what I call the core skills: situational awareness, critical thinking, effective decision-making, effective and directive communication, action or inaction, and learning. So we very rarely actually learn each of those 6 skills. We assume that you should have them when you come to work.
Mm-hmm.
And most of the time, we get upset when people who work for us don't have them. But just think about 5 generations in the workplace who look at those 5 things or 6 things very differently. So it's not that we don't have them, it's that we apply them differently, and they're not standardized, they're not aligned, nor are they applied in the context we're operating in today. So part of what we have to do is look at where we are today and where we're moving to, and design methodologies that work. So simply put, if you're not looking at risk and resilience as an opportunity, you're leaving a ton on the table. If you're not integrating leadership and high performance with risk and resilience in your strategy and your application, you're setting yourself up for failure in the current operating context, because you're building a model that only works well when you have high degrees of control and certainty, as opposed to can work well in both domains. So really what we need to be doing is providing the knowledge, skills, and capability for leaders and anyone aspiring to lead. And when I say leading, that includes leading yourself and leading your family and leading your friend group, not just having the title manager or executive, to be able to thrive in the world we're in and be ready for the world that's coming. And that no doubt will set off a conversation around artificial intelligence and generative AI and all those other
Sure.
things.
Well, I did notice that
that's
you
where
added,
we're going.
Yeah, I mean, you added the D, didn't you? To reflect that. But before we get to that, so firstly, you emphasize Australia, is suffering from productivity challenges. So why do you, I mean, obviously we're talking Australian context because we are in Australia, but do you think that what we're experiencing is uniquely Australian or uniquely first world countries, or I mean, how broad is this phenomenon?
So great question. I think it's a little more prominent in Australia, but it is a problem that a lot of first world democracies are facing post-COVID.
So why is it more prominent in Australia then?
So I think a few things. If we look back, and I've had the gift of being able to academically study risk and decision making for almost a decade. When we started with this well over a decade ago, there was this idea that risk and compliance are the same thing within most financial services organizations. And if you look at the GRC functions, governance often meant risk management. In other words, you have to do what the rules tell you. Compliance means you have to do what the rules tell you. And then we put this risk thing in the middle of that. And it's no surprise that risk has actually turned into compliance as well. Mm-hmm. We also, from an Australian perspective, have had the benefit of saltwater insulation for a long time. That's kept us really safe.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. Our ability to largely be under affected as compared to the rest of the world through the GFC and through COVID. I've not heard it presented, what did you call it, a saltwater phenomenon? But, I definitely agree. It wasn't due to good government. It was just the fact that we're a long way away, and we had the ability to close our borders, and geography played a big part in the fact that Australia has largely been able to thrive during global situations.
And to support your point further, I think Australians are incredibly lucky. Like if you just travel abroad and you look at many of the other third world or emerging market countries, I've worked in about 22 countries so far. Australia is wonderful. We're a wealthy country with a small population, with comparatively good climate. We've got a pretty good rule of law. And for the most part, we have a relatively educated populace. We have a lot going for us. The challenge we've got is that as a result of having a lot going for us, there's not a strong driver for people to innovate, adapt, become entrepreneurial. Our operating systems are really not designed for startup business and small business to succeed and thrive. In fact, I was at a directors event not so long ago, and there were regulators sitting there around the table who were saying there's no such thing as different standards and measures for small, medium, and large business, because if you're in business, you should meet all your compliance requirements, regardless of the size of your business. So if we look at that practically, it makes startups in Australia, and I know both you and I have got successful startups that have turned into mature businesses, but it makes this one of the hardest places in the world to do that compared to many other countries. I certainly
think it's the compliance element, and also, not that it's really for this conversation, but the burden of taxation. As a small business owner, the onerous tax that we are being hammered by, that larger businesses are largely able to avoid through a whole means of offshoring and different things. It is incredibly difficult for small business to survive in the medium to longer term. Coming back to that point that you made about the fact that there are now 5 generations at work. I mean, one of the things that, I'm often asked by CEOs and business owners is, why is there a lack of loyalty, by younger people? And so I sort of, I think back to my own experience. And when I finished university, I got my first job at James Hardie, and I sat in an office surrounded by older men and women who had worked for James Hardie for a long time, and they were available to ask questions and be mentored by. And on Fridays we'd go to the pub and we'd have lunch, and they'd share all the old war stories, and so there was a real sense of being part of a team and learning from those who've walked the path before. I believe during COVID, it was not so much the younger people that didn't want to come to the office. It was more the middle-aged people with kids, and and it was those leaders who were more absent. And so, how do you expect your younger staff to be loyal and be retained if they're missing out on the opportunity of being developed to their full potential by you as a leader? And I think the other thing is that, as a younger person, we believed that work hard, get a degree, get married, buy a house, have kids. Whereas younger people now are saying, I don't think I'll ever be able to buy a house. I'm not being forced to move out of home. We wanted to leave home because we wanted to, have our girlfriend stay the night. Well, now parents are saying, not only can your girlfriend or boyfriend stay the night, they could move in, right? So kids are hanging around at home a lot longer, and they also know that the job market is such that there is a lot of opportunity. So as a leader, especially what am I, Gen X, uh, it is thinking about what is a new leadership style that is going to engage and appeal to those younger people, so that even though there has been substantive existential issues, I can still retain and develop my people to their highest potential.
So to your point, and you made some excellent points there. Thank you, Richard. That's gives me lots of linkage points around Presilience and leadership and where we're at. But part of the challenge is we're also coming out of an era which was really designed based on lean ideals, very tight operating or just-in-time work models, and a lot of those evolved out of the first, second, and third industrial revolutions. People smarter than me reckoned in 2019, 2020, we entered the fifth industrial revolution, which has been described as, we now need the dance between man and machine to be figured out as opposed to be introduced. So part of the challenge is things have gotten faster. So never before have humans had lifetime connectivity globally the way we do. Never before have we had the information of the world in your pocket. And now with Gen AI, never before have you had the ability to consolidate all this information into workable pieces of information for you to use. So part of the challenge now is we are in a different world. We really are. And with 5 generations in the workplace, you've got 5 different views of what the world looks like. There are probably many more. So we don't have a uniform understanding of the world we live in, what we're trying to achieve, and how we're trying to achieve it. So to your point around young people being motivated, demotivated, part of the challenge we've actually got, and this is a challenge in a lot of first world countries, but I was over in the US for almost a month. I only got back last week. And despite what you see on the news, the east coast of the US is booming and pumping. I've never seen so much activity and opportunity, and I've traveled back and forward there many times. So, one of the challenges I think we've got in Australia is, the challenge that we have a very good social support system, which is wonderful. But equally, it doesn't drive enthusiasm and motivation for work if people go, look, worst case scenario, I'll just stay home and go on the dole. So part of what we've got to be doing is rethinking how do we develop a competitive drive across all 5 domains, across all 5 of the work generations that are playing today. So part of what we need to be thinking of is a uniquely human approach to the way we tackle these challenges, which is opposite to what the first, second, and third industrial revolutions taught us. The first, second, and third industrial revolutions were all about systemization, standardization, and optimization. And it really, I'm sure you would reflect back to this. I think back, we're getting a bit older now, but I think back to my first management and business courses that I took at university. And almost all of them had this idea that a really good business system is a system that's designed where the people are not important because you can just plug them in or pull them out. And the system is so robust that it doesn't matter what the individual thinks or wants. That does work very well, again, when you have control and certainty. Works terribly when we're facing variables we don't understand, situations that are out of our control, and demands from people who are thinking and looking at the world differently. So to be able to thrive in the modern world, we actually have to develop what I refer to in the book as ambidextrous capability. You can't anymore go, I'm the strategist or I'm the leader who sits at the top of the business and I do strategy. I don't get involved in ops. Or I'm the board director who only sets strategy and I don't want to stick my head into the business to understand what's going on. We actually now need to be able to identify, are we in a state of certainty or uncertainty? If we're in a state of uncertainty and limited control, then your skill sets have to be uniquely human. You have to figure out how to build rapport, motivate your humans, develop things like pattern recognition and problem-solving capability so that we empower the human to thrive, as opposed to try and squash the human into a box and expect them to perform in an environment where they're going, that doesn't add any value. So if we just take the work from home thing as an example, if we just look at this, almost looking at demographically, certain people are introverted or extroverted. So we know that generally extroverts don't work that well at home and want to be with other people. So even though they might like the luxury of staying at home or the convenience of being at home, they will thrive better when they're in a team of cohesive people, number one. Number two, if we look at motivation, the vast majority of people are extrinsically motivated, even though we want people to be intrinsically motivated because that gets to higher performance. And I speak about that in the book as well. If we look at extrinsically motivated extroverts, they actually struggle to work from home. They don't do well at home at all. So there's only a very small then of self-motivated, intrinsically motivated introverts, or potentially ambiverts who can cross between both, who will do very well working from home. So actually what we've done is we've done the wrong thing. We haven't really looked at human characteristics and figured out how do we get the best of our workforce. We've taken a blanket decision around outcomes and performance. So no wonder it doesn't work for everybody, because most of these things never work for everyone. They only work for certain characteristics. So that's a really good example of the Presilience approach. We want to understand humans and we want to bake risk intelligence into the way we make decisions, so that we're not just stuck with, doing really well when we're in control, but we can take risk or uncertainty or disruption and make it an opportunity by building the right risk intelligent human capital, systems approach, and process approach. And if we can balance those together, you get high performance. I can just use my business as an example. Like when we chatted last time, and it's crazy that it's 4 years ago, COVID was kicking a lot of us around, particularly businesses like yours and mine. I mean, we were at that point, training and consulting services had almost died, and we were trying to figure out how we were going to make it through. But it was a wonderful opportunity for me to take this Presilience methodology, mature it, and plug it into our business. And that meant that we came out of COVID roughly with 30 people and a 30 to 40% drop in revenue. Today, as I'm talking to you, in 3 years, we're 320 people, and we 10x revenue the first year after COVID, and then we doubled it the year after. So I know this stuff works because we're seeing it in practice with my own business and the clients we're using it with. What it does require is an openness and a mindset shift for your executive, your manager, and even your worker, who arguably might be the best placed person to respond to a disruption or figure out where an innovation can add a lot of value.
Yes, and I imagine for a lot of leaders, particularly older leaders, they'll be thinking, far out, man, like I'm already up to my neck in crocodiles. I'm doing the best I can. I'm under, intense scrutiny and expectation from my, senior leadership team and board. And now I've got to learn a whole new set of skills in order to be successful. I'd rather just sort of stick my head in the sand and hope for the best.
So to your point, that we are seeing that, and don't get me wrong, for your listeners who are in executive positions and are feeling that way, you've been through a really rough run. Through COVID particularly, leadership fatigue was real, decision fatigue was real, and nobody really gave leaders a pause afterwards and went, well done, you successfully steered your business through a really big disruption. Instead, it was get back to business, start making us money. And part of the challenge with that is people are tired and fatigued and haven't even realized they are. If you look at any news channel, and it was really interesting, I was in an executive briefing the other day with one of the former CEOs from one of the big four banks, and they made the comment that a few years ago, they stopped using news sources as places to get information, and they set up their own intelligence capability within the bank to give them real on-ground truth, because they found the misinformation, disinformation, malinformation challenge was already then so overwhelming. And I think that's something we've got to factor back in for leaders today. The game we're playing is much harder and much more complicated than it used to be. We think it's easier because we've got technology, but practically we've never had technology that we have now. So we don't have rule books on how do we plug Gen AI into the workplace, for example, and manage the risks easily. We don't necessarily even have generations who are comfortable surfing the internet yet. So we've seen, 30 years of this last 30 years of evolution or change have really brought on hundreds of years worth of adaptation and change in such a short period of time, so short that humans can't keep up. So realistically, what we have to be doing is not looking at learning new skills. And I think this is an important part for those who are already feeling overwhelmed, already feeling time poor. We have to be looking at what are the oil components. So what will lubricate the system we work in? Generally, that's a combination of people, process, and tech applied the right way. And what will glue it together? And generally, what glues it together are your corporate values and trust. So if we can't build those components, you're not going to get a robust, resilient, high-performing organization. So my take on this is, if you've got executives sitting there going, we don't want to do anything new, we don't want to look at a new way of doing stuff, they haven't been looking at what's happening around them. And in all likelihood, those are the organizations, leaders, and businesses that will get badly disrupted through this next iteration of Gen AI. And particularly as we see things normalize with tariffs and trade and the new global power play that we're seeing happening around us, if you just look at the Trump-esque way of doing things, it favors bold decision making, it favors bold business, and it favors getting out there and doing stuff. Okay, all things that generally, from an Australian economy perspective, we are not supported to do very well.
Well, just look at the latest election result. Landslide victory for Labor, which really reflects in very real time exactly what you're saying.
100%. So part of the challenge we've got is it's significant. It's not a small challenge. Like if we're actually going to get to the point where you love doing what you do and you run a thriving business that contributes to the economy, pays taxes, and grows not just your business, but the people who work there and the country as a whole, we actually have to shift from our risk aversion to a slightly more robust way of dealing with the challenges and opportunities around us. And, that's uncomfortable for a lot of people who've built careers on not making mistakes, not making decisions, and trying to keep out of trouble to climb a corporate ladder. Where, one of my psychology of risk grads, and I'm not going to say which very large government agency, but I caught up with him about 6 months ago, and we were having a chat about the organization he was working for. And he looked so run down and frustrated. And I said to him, why? He said to me, I'm working for an organization, and sorry for those of you who are not soccer fans, but his analogy was a soccer analogy.
Right.
He said the organization I'm working for would rather lose the game 100-0 than risk scoring an own goal. So
right.
if you look at that mindset, no wonder we're not moving forward. No wonder people don't want to come to work. No wonder they're not enthused, because there's so much supporting research that shows when people are trusted, enabled, buy into the corporate vision, trust their leaders, and are able to create, we get sustainable high performance.
So, Gav, you mentioned your own business, but perhaps give us a real example of perhaps where you've worked with an organization and the steps that they went through to go to successfully transition to a position of Presilience.
Awesome. So we've done a bunch of different projects ranging from government, large federal government clients to regulated health funds. We've also done stuff with rail operators and airlines. Fundamentally, where this works best is where you get individuals in the organization that have a mental shift. And they realize, hold on a second, if I keep looking at risk only in a negative light, if I don't link it to strategy, leadership, and high performance, I don't get a great outcome. So where we've seen this work very, very well is where there are leaders who are frustrated and want a different way of doing things, okay, and need to get their teams behind them. It doesn't really matter the sector that much. It also doesn't necessarily matter the way you enter with this stuff, because we've done this with policy. So in government, one of the government departments, we came in through 2 policy setting divisions, and we rolled out a risk intelligence Presilience project on that. For one of the law enforcement agencies, it was a culture change thing. They were merging 2 divisions together, and they couldn't get them to fit. So we sent the behavioral scientists in, and we took the methodology, and we built them a roadmap. We also did something similar for incident and emergency management with a very large rail operator, where we took the principles of Presilience, and the rail operator picked 4 key attributes. They picked situational awareness, critical thinking, decision-making, and comms. And they asked us to build them a customized version of the stuff to roll out. And we trained about 300 leaders through their business in that methodology and had great results. So I think probably the best affirmation for this stuff is when we won or made the AFR's most innovative list for the Presilience work, we surveyed a lot of our psychology of risk and Presilience grads, and the feedback was almost universal, where between like 85 and 95% of them felt that the skills they were given were enabling them to thrive through the COVID disruption, and were enabling them to add significant value to their businesses because of their ability to self-manage and bring others with them on the journey. So realistically, even if it was just, and if you're listening to this, just indulge me for 30 seconds. Imagine a country, a world, a business where decision-making was based not just on the immediate information in front of you, but was actually based on real vetted factual information. Imagine a business, again, a country, a world where your leaders weren't just looking at what is the short-term motivation for them, but were actually looking at what is good for them, good for their people, good for their clients, and good for the greater good. And we're making decisions based on positive outcomes, not just negative risk management. Now, don't get me wrong. I'm not saying we shouldn't manage bad things, because there's plenty bad things that can happen. But if we're only fixated on stopping bad stuff happening, you can't grab upside opportunity when it presents. So it's a balancing act. We actually call that term dynamic risk equilibrium. And the idea is literally it's a dream, right? You actually want to take dynamic DRE, dynamic risk equilibrium, and apply it in management. So the dream term is really important, because what we need now to thrive is far less of a binary approach. We need to understand that most of what we're dealing with now is gray. And if you can't manifest and move through the gray, then you're getting disrupted continuously, which is going to destroy your mental health, physical health, and your organization's performance. So I like to look at this as a building blocks thing. There's nothing wrong with starting with you, because if you are not healthy and confident and understand yourself, nobody's going to want to follow you, and you're not going to have a great life or a great career. Next would be your team or your people around you. And I've had great results with some of our graduates who've literally looked at their organization and gone, that is going to be too hard to change. I'm just going to focus on my family for now. And some of them have come back to me with these incredible stories of how, their family unit cohesion has increased, their capability to get along has increased, their spouse and their kids are now thriving and doing better. So, what I would urge your listeners to look at is, if obviously I would love you to buy my book and I'd love you to look at what we're talking about, but it's not necessarily a cover to cover read. You can grab tools and go, I like that tool. I want to just use that tool. And if it makes something better, that's a win for all of us.
Yeah, I think it was, as I was saying to you before we started recording, having read not the book cover to cover, but a large percentage of the book, it's very practical, and it's, for me, reading it was, well, these are things that I already know, but it's almost like I know that if I want to lose weight, I need to eat less and exercise more. There's no magic formula. That it's pretty simple. If you eat less and exercise more, you'll lose weight, right? And yet, I don't do it. So it's not through a lack of awareness. So if people are thinking, well, this sounds pretty daunting, it's going to be some monumental shift in the way that I lead or the way that I strategize my business. It's not. It's more saying, okay, through the application of some simple frameworks, it will help to get a more consistent outcome.
Well, to your point, I like to look at it on a few different levels. So the first point is, it is fundamentally a mindset shift, right? Yeah. It's a small way of just changing the way you think, which you manifest through using tools that come together through a framework. And if you do it right, we'll build a high performance culture. Mm-hmm. But practically, if we look at how this all kind of manifests, the growth mindset is crucial. And if you're not in that growth mindset, it's going to be very hard for you to be a high performer, regardless of where you work. But practically, if we want to understand what the next steps need to look like, there's absolutely nothing wrong with somebody like you who's run your business successfully for a few decades, I think now.
16 years, my own business.
60, nearly there, nearly 2 decades, which is a massive achievement. And you're well read, you're well studied, and you understand humans. So people who fit into your category will very often look at the work, and for me, the work then provides validation. It helps you be able to tick off and go, cool, I think I'm doing well because I understood most of this and I can apply most of this. What it also does then is enables you to sharpen some of the tools you might not have used for a while, or add some tools to your toolbox that might have been missing for certain circumstances. Equally, for those who don't have certain tools to solve certain problems or deal with certain things, it provides those tools as something they can pick and choose. And lastly, because sometimes things happen so quickly, you might just not need a toolbox, you might need a tool belt that you want to go, hey, something like priming and framing. Those are actually skills that are very rarely taught, but enable incredible rapport building and good outcomes. That should be something that you make habitual, as opposed to something that you just use every now and again.
Yeah.
As should something like ethics and good communication skills. So practically, I didn't write the book to go, here is the Bible that will enable everybody to be a high performer. It's to try and meet the audience where they are and either validate, sharpen tools, provide new tools, provide a framework for success if missing, or a bit of all of that. And very thrilled so far. It's done really well. It's been in the top 20 best-selling risk, business forecasting, and business leadership books since its release.
Right.
Which is great.
Yeah. Well, look, as an author myself, having written 2 editions of one book and now my new book, Winning the War for Talent, I think your book and my book are similar in the fact that it's teaching people how to do it for themselves. Now, obviously, then if they say, well, we need to take it to another level, or perhaps I need some greater support, then that's an opportunity then to work with you directly. Similarly, my book from a recruitment point of view, it's written to teach organizations how to be more successful in attracting and retaining staff without using a recruiter. But Gav, look, to sort of wind out the conversation, I mean, we talk about digital, and I think that I imagine you're probably familiar with, all the talk about artificial general intelligence and 0-point singularity, and I mean that is such an existential either risk or opportunity that appears, depending on who you listen to either be, imminent or at some point in the future. There is a very real possibility that the entire reality of work as we know it could completely and utterly change, within a matter of years, if not within the next decade.
So absolutely agreed. But I think one thing is universal. So if we currently look at generative AI and we look at the controls to make sure generative AI doesn't run amok, those controls are humans. So it's fascinating to kind of look at it and go, humans are not great at decision making at the best of times. In fact, Gen AI is already in many cases more reliable and provides more consistently accurate decisions than most humans do. But the part that Gen AI is going to fall short on is the ability to implement the knowledge or actually apply the knowledge in a meaningful way, at least for the next decade or so. Who knows when we get to your point around singularity and the intersection of intelligence, robotics, and AI in terms of doing stuff. But for the immediate term, I really do believe, I don't think generative AI will take anyone's job, but people who understand how to use it will absolutely take other people's jobs.
Yeah, I think that's a fairly commonly held belief now. And it's interesting, you talk about the Industrial Revolution, when 95% of people worked in agriculture, and then there was the Industrial Revolution. There was still, almost a total employment, and moving into these new, it's just different employment. But if anything, it's going to further escalate the the massive gulf between the haves and the have-nots. And I think what we're seeing that illustrated in, the recent US election result, and now in the Australian result, and what's happening in the world. It's a fascinating time to be alive, a fascinating time to be in business. And I think that, I would certainly recommend all business leaders read Gav's book, because it's a reaffirmation of what you're probably doing well, and a bit of a reminder as to what you perhaps should be spending some of your limited capacity on, either relearning or learning, in order to ensure that as these massive changes happen, you are Presilience and you're taking the best, you're achieving your highest potential through seizing the opportunities that come out of these existential situations. So, Gav, it's been excellent to chat to you today. Before we wind it up, are there any final comments or anything that you'd like to add?
No, just I don't see that we have any competition in this space, because we need thousands and thousands and thousands of us to start thinking and acting and working differently, so that we're not constantly getting disrupted. We're actually thriving through disruptive periods. So, please join us on this journey, because if you don't, it's incredibly likely you're going to get left behind, face burnout, or experience a horrible working environment for yourself and your team. And none of us want that. We want happy, motivated people who are kicking and scoring goals.
We certainly do. And so, Gav, what's the best way for people listening to perhaps connect with you and learn more about your service offerings and so on?
Sure. LinkedIn is the easiest way to connect with me directly. You can check out drgavschneider.com, which has my speaking and written work on it. And equally, our business website is risk-to-solution.com. If you're looking at any of our professional services, they're listed there. And a small request, if you do buy the book and you like it, please do give it an Amazon review or an iTunes review. As you know, Richard, that's the number one currency for authors. It means a lot
for sure.
to us.
Yeah, look, I kind of gave up chasing those things. They are very important, like Google 5-star reviews and so on and so forth. But reputation speaks for itself, and the fact that you're back here for a second time, and watching what you've been up to, and obviously reading your book, you're doing great things, and of which are highly valued by the broader business community. So I congratulate you, and I look forward to perhaps having you back again in hopefully not another 4 years' time, but to look back on this period now and see what's really changed, because the speed of change is only going to increase, which makes what you're talking about even more important. So thanks, and have a fantastic afternoon.
Thank you, Richard, and thank you to your listeners. Much appreciated.
Right.
Thank you for listening to the Arate podcast with Richard Triggs. We frequently feature guests from organisations we are currently recruiting to build the company brand as an attraction strategy for candidates. If you would like to promote your organisation's brand as an employer of choice, please contact Richard directly on 0403 588 517 or via email richardt@arateexecutive.com.au.